If everybody on 25, 28, 30 grand a year needs to go to a food bank, half the country would be at food banks, and they're not. Let's talk to Christine Jardine now. She's a Liberal Democrat MP and frontbench spokeswoman for the party. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just let everyone know we're going to be talking to a representative of the Labour Party and, of course, also a government minister, Maria Caulfield, a health minister who herself is a former nurse, later in the show. I'll put the same question to you as I'm putting to my audience this morning. Do you support the nurses going on strike today?
I don't think it's a question of supporting the nurses going on strike. It's a question of being distressed. We all are upset that it's got to the stage where nurses who've never been on strike before have taken this step. And I completely understand the anger that the nurses and the paramedics and other NHS staff feel that have driven to this after years of this Conservative government just neglecting them and not addressing the serious issues that there are in the NHS with so many low-paid frontline NHS staff. And the Conservative government needs a proper plan for the NHS pay now. And we should not live in a country where a quarter of the hospitals have set up food banks for nurses. That's how bad this situation is.
Why would someone on... Christine, why would someone on more than 25 grand a year, which is what you basically start on, and most nurses on far more than that? No one is saying that nurses are millionaires and they're driving around in their Bentleys. I mean, for goodness sake, it's not a well-paid job. But this idea that nurses are on sort of pittance pay, that's below average income for this country for a starting nurse. But who wasn't on below average pay when they started in their job? Why on earth would someone on that salary need to go to a food bank?
Well, the question is, why is it so difficult for us in this country to get to grips with the problem? And why
No, Christine, answer the...
Julia,
Christine, you chose to make the point that nurses, that they've set up food banks for nurses in the NHS. If everybody on 25, 28, 30 grand a year needs to go to a food bank, half the country would be at food banks, and they're not. So why would a nurse earning 25, 30 grand need to use a food bank?
You know, Julia, I think you might find there's an awful lot more people using food banks than you think.
We know the stats on people using food banks because they're put out by the food banks. And it ain't half the country, Christine. There is no doubt at all. People are struggling. I've no doubt at all. There may be some more people who happen to be in that career who've got there's debt issues. There's a domestic abuse situation. They've had to leave home. They haven't got their benefits in time. I completely understand. But the idea that most nurses or any nurses en masse are paid a salary that is so low that they need to rely on charity to feed themselves and their families is an abject nonsense. And we shouldn't make false claims like that.
Nobody's making false claims.
You did. You just said they need to use food banks.
I just said that a quarter of the hospitals have set up food banks for nurses. Now, that's not me making a claim about numbers of nurses or what they're doing with salaries.
So you don't think the nurses need to use them either, then?
No, I didn't say that. That is me making... Julia, do you want to talk about the nurses' strike, or do you want to make a political point about nurses?
No, but talk about the nurses' strike. If we do it in the context of these nurses are so badly paid, they have to use food banks, which is why the food banks have been set up. That is the context in which we have that conversation. I'm just saying, unlike other television and radio stations, I don't let those things go unchallenged because I think they're nonsense. And I think we can have a serious conversation about whether nurses are paid enough or not without making stupid claims.
Can I ask you a question? When was the last time you actually went out and spoke to a nurse about what they actually do?
One of my close relatives is a nurse.
Good. Well, then you'll know that the state of the NHS
she doesn't go to a
is
food
at the
bank.
root of this problem. Good. I'm pleased. Now, listen, the state of the NHS and the government's inability to act is at the root of this problem. Let's not get diverted about talking about who is and who isn't using food banks.
I didn't bring it up.
From the root.
Right.
That's getting away from the root problem, which is the government's inability to look at this problem, to deal with it, and to have a plan for the NHS.
We need an NHS plan. We need a workforce plan. Christine, I'm 100%...
we have huge workforce shortages in the NHS.
100%. Agree with you on all of that. There's been a deal in Scotland, 7.5%.
No, there hasn't actually. That's actually not the truth. The picture in Scotland at the moment is that the government made a final offer which the nurses paused and are considering, and there is currently a consultation going on, and we will have the results of it on Monday. So it's not quite right to say that it's settled. It's not. It's out to consultation, and we'll know the results of the consultation, on Monday.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. I appreciate that. But there has been criticism. I mean, Keir Starmer for the Labour Party yesterday at PMQs, he said that this is the first strike in a 100-plus year history of the Royal College of Nursing. It's a badge of shame, he says, for the Tories. If you were in power, just say we were in Tory Lib Dem coalition again, as under the Cameron-Clegg years, what would you be urging the government to do?
Well, the first thing the government should have done is talk to the nurses. They should be making much more of an effort to do this. And the thing is, we are now in this situation where the government has allowed over the years for this situation to develop, and they're not talking to not just the nurses but anybody, and they should be addressing. I'm so sorry. Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, met with the RCN leader this week. They should be addressing the shortages of staff. They should be doing more to encourage people into the NHS, and should have been doing it much, much sooner. They should have recognised when we were going through the pandemic, they should have recognised much more clearly the work that was being done by NHS frontline staff. And they should have a plan going forward. There is no plan for the NHS. This government doesn't seem to know what to do about the NHS, or very much else for that matter. And any responsible government would not have allowed it to get to this stage. And that is the problem with this government. They have allowed it to reach this stage. The nurses don't want to be on strike, Julia. This is not a point that if you speak to any member of the NHS, they do not want to be on strike.
No, there's no doubt at all. This is not a militant union that just goes out on strike. And I completely accept that. However, and I completely accept also they've seen, to all intents and purposes, a 20% pay cut in real terms over the last 12 years, and they want to try and recoup some of that. They're asking for 19.2%. No one, even in the private sector, is getting 19.2%. They may well settle. Are they?
I saw Pat Cullen last night say that actually what they're asking for is 5% over inflation. I'm not saying whether that's right or that's wrong, but I think we have to be fair. That is what they're asking for. That's not necessarily 19%.
But it was RPI, and it was at the time when they were asking for it. Again, it would be different in a different month. Of course, there's no doubt at all. Can I ask you specifically, though, about the impact on patients? Because we're told up to 70,000 appointments and operations could be cancelled today. Also, patients being cancelled on for the next couple of days as well. Inpatient procedures, 6,000. These will be hip operations, knee operations that have been scheduled perhaps and waited for years, that people are in pain waiting for. We're told that, with skeleton service, Christmas Day service, realistically, patients are going to be delayed getting into A&E, getting treatment. They're going to be delayed getting an ambulance to drop them off. We are going to we're already seeing excess deaths, see people die. We've had the Royal College of Nursing rejecting pleas from NHS bosses and cancer charities to exempt urgent cancer surgery from strike action. I mean, the reality is this doesn't punish the government, and it doesn't punish the NHS bosses. It is ordinary people who've paid their taxes, who are seriously ill with cancer or after an accident or a heart attack today, who are going to probably risk losing their lives or have, or even die today because of this treatment. So of this strike action. Can any pay demand justify that?
I don't think any of us wanted to see this. I don't think any of us like what is happening. And I personally don't think that we should be in this situation. I don't think this is just about a pay demand. And I don't think that it's as simple as does it justify it. I don't think any of us want to see this strike. I don't think any of us like this strike. And I think we all want to see it settled as quickly as possible. And I think at the core of that are the NHS staff themselves, the nurses, who do not want to be in this. They deserve better than they've had so far. And what I'd like to see is as many as people as possible avoid this situation that the country is in at the moment.
It's all very well sitting on the...
I think the blame lies fairly and squarely with the government for allowing it to get to the stage where this has happened. Okay. And they do have to fix it as quickly as possible. All right,
but again, you've said that again and again. But again, we're into that situation where we like the Labour Party, you won't actually state you support the strike or don't support the strike. Can I ask you just finally another subject? Channel migrants, those awful tragedy of those deaths, 4 people dead, others missing, presumed dead in the Channel, 39 people pulled from the water by fishermen. Whose fault is that? Who's to blame for those people dying in the Channel yesterday?
I think it's horrible. And I don't think it matters what you think about the government's policy so far. None of us, including the government, want to see those deaths. Your heart breaks for people who are driven to flee their countries, their families, their homes, everything they know, and then that happens to them. What I think we need in this country is a proper immigration policy that works for people. We need safe legal routes, and we need to stop trying to solve the problem at the end. What we have to do is solve the problem at its root. We need to be talking to agencies in countries that people are fleeing from. We need to be setting up safe legal routes for them to come to this country and other countries, and stop trying to close the doors, leave it after the dangerous route to try and do something about it. We have to get in and break the gangs of people smugglers who are doing this. And we don't do that by making it more difficult, giving them a market to charge people for coming to this country. We do it by setting up safe legal routes.
And how many of the people on that boat yesterday think realistically would get approved on a safe legal route and would be able to travel and would therefore not pay $5,000 to a people trafficker to get on that boat?
I don't know, because I don't know the people who were on that boat yesterday. What I know is that there were people who were driven to flee their homes.
They were in France.
Their families, everything.
They were in France.
They were in France. Julia,
they were in France.
They had fled everything they knew. We don't know whether they had country or family.
And they may well have been fleeing war and persecution. They were in France.
That to me is not the answer. The answer is to look at why they're fleeing, set up safe legal routes, and try and break the gangs of people who charge them the money to come here. The people who died in the Channel yesterday, the people who risked their lives in the Channel, they are not the criminals here.
But they are actually, under the law, they are criminals. Entering the country illegally and that format is a crime, actually.
The criminals here are the ones who are charging them money to risk their lives and making money out of it. And the government needs to stop trying to make gestures and actually have a sound immigration policy that helps people, that addresses the issue.
Christine, we're going over the same ground again. I'm sorry to interrupt. You have to go. Thank you for joining us there. I appreciate it.